This is your quick and easy guide to make your game as optimized as possible, including secret graphics settings, quality of life changes like preventing the annoying pop-ups when you launch the game or automatically skipping the intro cutscene, filter tutorials, custom icon tutorials, and settings to drastically increase performance in not only DBD but other games as well. I'll also be answering all frequently asked questions from my tutorial 2 years ago, so you have as much information as possible, including crashing issues, ban risk, and more. Make sure you stick around till the end of the video because there are some things that you have to change to make this all run properly, and if you don't follow all of these steps, your game or your PC can run very poorly. If you're on console, there are a few things that I can help with to potentially make your game run smoother, so just skip to the timestamps on screen. Absolutely everything else in this video will be PC exclusive. Before we start anything, search for Restore Point in Windows and click on Create a Restore Point. This will bring up this window and you're just going to want to click Create. This will create a point in time on your computer to essentially revert everything you change in this video in case you run into any issues with performance or if you just want to start over from scratch. So click Create and name it whatever you want. Then close out of that and click OK once you're done. The first thing we're going to do is customize our graphics settings. The ban risk of this is extremely low because you're quite literally just changing settings that are changed from DBD's in-game settings, but you have more options at your disposal. However, there is never a 0% chance that you will get banned, so always do this at your own discretion. I don't personally know a single person that has been banned for anything that I talk about in this video, but it is always possible that behavior will decide to change the anti-cheat or the rules at some point in the future. So again, there is never a 0% chance that doing any of this will get you banned, but it's highly unlikely. Starting off with your graphic settings, you're going to want to press the Windows key and the R key to bring up this little prompt down here and type in %local app data % and then press OK or enter. This will bring up your file explorer and you're just going to want to look for Dead by Daylight, saved, config. If you're on Steam, open Windows Client, and if you're on Epic Games, open EGS. So I'm going to be doing this on Steam, so I'm going to open Windows Client. Before we do anything, make sure you go to View, Show, and turn on file name extensions. This is for some reason turned off by default, but it just basically shows you like the .ini or .mp4 or .png, whatever it is for your files. You should always have this on if you're using a PC. It just makes life so much easier. Now scroll down until you see GameUserSettings.ini, right click on it, go to Properties, and make sure that Read Only is unchecked. Now open GameUserSettings up and it'll bring up a notepad. Before we continue further, make sure you close out of DBD so DBD is not running in the background. I don't think it necessarily matters, but I would just do it just in case. All right, let's start with the scalability groups. These are all of the settings that the graphic presets in-game are changing, but here you can customize each individual setting to your liking. Resolution quality is obviously just how good your resolution is. If you're on a really low-end computer, I would maybe lower this to 80 or something. I think anything below 80 just makes the game look way too blurry and way too pixelated, but if you really need that performance, resolution quality does increase your performance a lot, but I personally wouldn't go below 80. I would recommend doing 100 because that's just your native resolution, but if you're on a really high-end computer, you can turn this above 100. The maximum I would probably go is 135, but you can keep incrementing it if you want to see if your computer can handle it. Whatever you change your resolution quality to, so I'm going to do mine at 135, you have to change your screen render size as well, so I'm going to change this to 135 too. So for the rest of the settings, they all can go up to 4, which is higher than what DBD allows in-game. DBD allows up to ultra settings, which is only 3, but technically Unreal Engine, which is the engine used to create this game, has a 4th setting, which is called cinematic, so you can increase your quality even further if you want to. I'm going to go through each setting one by one, and at the end, I'll show you a bunch of different combinations that you can use depending on if you have a low-end PC or a high-end PC. So the first one is view distance. This is pretty much exactly what it sounds. The higher you have it up, the further away you can see certain things happening. So for example, if you have this on 0, which is low, this will make it so that you have to be close to a generator to see the generator pistons moving. But if you're far away, it'll look like they're completely still. I think this is one of the most important things to keep on to a high setting like 3 or 4. I would recommend 4 personally because I think view distance is very important in DBD just for gathering information, and it doesn't cost that much on your performance because every map is relatively small compared to other games that would have view distance like Fortnite or like other open world games. Anti-aliasing quality, this is a very personal preference thing. It's basically just smoothing out the edges to get rid of these weird jagged lines. I really like anti-aliasing, but I know a lot of people that think it makes the game look blurry. So if you're one of those people, you can turn this to 0, but I personally like it, so I'm going to keep it at max. If you want kind of a middle ground, turn it to 2 or maybe 3. Shadow quality, I just keep that on 0. If you really want your game to look pretty, you could turn it to 3 or 4, but I don't really care about how good the shadows look, so I just keep it at 0. It helps to make shaded areas less dark as well, which is kind of nice. Post-process quality, you can literally set this to whatever you want. It's really not going to make that much of a difference. These are essentially all of the effects like chromatic aberration or film grain. One of the most notable maps I would say that has the post-processing is Midwich because you can see a ton of film grain, and I actually think it looks really cool and really cinematic, so I like to keep it on 4, which is max. So you can turn this down to 0 if you want to save a little bit of performance, but really it's not going to affect much. Texture quality is one of the things that will make your game look the best, but it's also one of the most costly things to change. So if you have this on 0, your game's going to look a little bit like Play-Doh, but it's going to perform much better. I want my game to look as good as possible, so I'm keeping this at 4, which is the maximum amount. But if you are running into a lot of FPS issues, I would recommend turning this down to maybe 3 or 2 and seeing if you can run that. If you're on a really low end PC, then turn this down all the way to 0, because at that point you probably care more about the stability of your game than how the game looks. Effects quality is kind of similar. I don't think it's as necessary to have at a higher number. This is essentially all effects like particles or fire or any of that stuff. It's not really going to affect gameplay, so you can set this to 0 and not be bothered by it. And setting it low will definitely help with your performance. I'm going to set it at 2 personally, because I think it's a good middle ground between how it looks and performance. But if you're trying to get the most FPS possible, I would turn that to 0. Foliage quality, I would just turn that to 0. This is literally just the quality of like trees and bushes. You're not going to be looking at the detail of foliage at all. So just turn it to 0. It'll save a lot of performance, and it'll also make it easier to see people that are hiding in bushes. It's a very subtle difference, so it's not like that advantageous, but it still does help a little bit. For shading quality and animation quality, I really don't think it matters whatever you have. I don't even really know what animation quality does. I would probably just turn these to 0 if you want to increase performance. I'm personally going to keep them on max because I have a good computer, but I don't exactly know what they do. So if you don't care about how your game looks, just turn it to 0. Okay, moving to the actual game user settings. If you scroll down, scalability level, from my understanding, it affects the quality of your in-game UI. So if it's on a value like 0 or 1, stuff like your skill checks and perks may be blurry. I would recommend turning this up to 3 because it doesn't really affect your performance, as it's just like PNGs. But if you do notice that these HUD elements are blurry in game, mess around with the settings so they're no longer blurry. Auto scalability set to false. Auto adjust also set to false. Screen render size, again, has to be the same as your resolution quality for it to, take effect. HUD constrained aspect ratio set to false. Menu scale factor and HUD scale factor. The lowest that you can go with these is 70. And this is a setting that you can change in game to just make your HUD smaller or bigger. I will be showing you guys a method to make your in-game HUD even smaller than 70. So if you're interested in getting this really minimal look, stick around for that. So whatever you have at this is personal preference. I really like minimalism, so I keep it at the lowest I can go. Skill check scale factor, however, I would keep at 100 because this is how big your skill checks are. So obviously you want to have that as big as possible because it'll be easier to see and easier to hit. Large text, I set that to false. I think this is only for subtitles. So if you have subtitles on and you want the subtitles to be bigger, you can turn that on, but I don't use subtitles personally. Blood web interaction behavior, I have this set to true. Essentially what this is if you have it set to true, that means that you just have to click on a node instead of holding down on the node to actually buy it. I think this is much easier, and I think everybody should do this because you could just move your mouse and keep clicking on stuff on the blood web without having to hold your mouse down. Terror radius visual feedback, set this to true. There is no reason to have this on false. This is that little visual heartbeat that you'll see people have when you're in the killer's terror radius or when you're in their lullaby. Just set this to true. There's quite literally no reason to not have this on. It just makes it easier to know when the killer's getting close to you. For field of view, you will not actually see this unless you participated in the latest PTB. Basically, they're implementing an FOV slider, so you can go from the default, which I believe is 87 FOV, to 103 FOV, which is what Shadowborn gave you. In the PTB, you could change this setting to whatever you want, so I like to use it on 120 because I think it looks great, but Behavior may decide to cap this at 103, even in this config file, if they don't want people going above the cap that's in the game. So I would just set this to 103 for now if you have it. If you don't have this setting yet and the FOV slider is in your game because the update came out, I'll show you how to refresh this file later to get this setting. HUD player names visibility. This is just if you want to be able to see player names on your HUD. If you really want the minimal look, you turn this to false, but I think it's helpful to keep to true because it's easier for me to track which survivors are which, especially if they're using the same character. HUD killer hook count visibility, always keep this to true. Keeping count of your hooks is just a nice thing to have. I keep my score events visibility to true. This is literally just the points that you see on the top right of your screen whenever you do something. So if you find that annoying, you can set it to false, but I don't really personally care. Legacy prestige portraits. These are the red portraits that you see on your character portraits if they were prestige 3 before the prestige rework. So if you have OCD and you don't like half of your characters having the red background and half of them not, turn this to false, but I'm just going to keep it on true. Challenge progression and challenge completion. These are essentially notifiers in game whenever you complete one of the tome challenges that you're working on or whenever you finish one of those tome challenges. I would keep this on. There's no point in having this off. So set this to true. FPS limit. This has a max cap of 120. So if you're on a 60 hertz monitor, there's no point in raising this above 60. But if you're on a 144 hertz or above, set this to 120. This will just make your game much smoother. Anti-aliasing mode. So like I said earlier, if you think anti-aliasing makes your game look blurry, turn this to 0. But if you are using anti-aliasing, I would keep this on 2 because that's using TAA, which is temporal anti-aliasing, which according to the Unreal Engine documentation is the best anti-aliasing to use. Enable FSR. This is a new setting that Behavior implemented that essentially lowers your resolution, but then uses algorithms to upscale your resolution back to normal to make it look like it didn't even lower the resolution at all. For console players, this is a setting that you can change in-game, and I would definitely recommend turning it on. I've seen a ton of console players say that it's helped performance, so it might do the same for you. For PC players, I would also turn it on and see if there's a noticeable difference. I personally don't have a lot of experience with it, so try experimenting with it to see if it works for your setup. If you want to turn it on, change it to true. For sharpness value, just change this to 3 because we'll be kind of messing with this later in the video. Mute on focus lost. This essentially means that if you alt tab out of the game, it'll mute the game. I like to keep this on true for 2 reasons. One, if I'm just idling on the main menu and I don't want to hear the music, or I don't want to hear, the characters making their sounds, I can just not be in the game. But 2, if you're annoyed with the character screams every time you play killer, you can alt tab right after you put a survivor on the hook, and supposedly it'll make the character screaming shorter, or it'll just stop it completely. I've never actually tried this because I don't really mind the screams, but you could try this and see if this works. Haptics vibration PS5. Change this to false if you don't use a controller, because there's no point in having it on. If you do use a controller and you like the vibrations, just keep it to true. Killer and survivor mouse and camera sensitivity, just do whatever you feel comfortable with. You probably don't need to change this because it's probably just what you already use. Killer controller and survivor controller sensitivity though, I would keep this at 100 if you're using keyboard and mouse, because if you go into your DBD controls and scroll down until you see like turn left and turn right, you can set those to Q and E. So if you're playing somebody like Billy, for example, you can continuously turn without running out of mousepad space just by pressing Q or E. And this turn rate sensitivity is affected by controller sensitivity, but not mouse sensitivity. However, in the next update, according to the patch notes, this will be fixed, but I would still err on the side of caution and change this to 100 anyway. Aim assist, absolutely keep this to true. Killer and survivor toggle interactions. I personally have this on false just because I'm used to it, but if you set it to true, this essentially means that you just have to click something to interact with it instead of holding it. So if you go up to a gen, for example, and you click left click as a survivor, you'll continue working on that gen until you left click again. Or if you're on killer and you go up to a gen and you press spacebar, instead of holding spacebar, it'll still kick the gen. I like to keep these on false because I feel more in control when I hold the buttons instead of clicking them, but that's personal preference. Sprint to cancel, same thing, personal preference. I keep mine on false. This essentially means that pressing your sprint button will cancel whatever interaction you're doing. I like to keep this on false because I use sprint burst a lot. And if I'm working on a gen, I like to hold shift. So if a killer comes out of nowhere, I don't have to press down shift when I start running away. It's just already held down. So it automatically activates the sprint burst when I leave the gen. Now scroll down until you see B use VSync. VSync essentially is a technology that reduces input lag and screen tearing at the cost of performance. It tries to synchronize your graphics card with your monitor to prevent drastic frame drops from being jarring. I personally would recommend setting this to false, as well as doing another setting that I'll show you later in the video to disable it entirely. But if you do notice a lot of screen tearing, you can try to set this to true and see if it fixes your issue. Dynamic resolution, I usually keep this on false. This changes your resolution depending on what's happening in the game to try to maintain a consistent frame rate. You can try setting it to true if you're running into frame drops, but otherwise I would recommend setting it to false. Resolution size X and size Y, you're going to want to set this to your monitor's resolution. So I have a 1440p monitor, so I'm setting this to 2560 by 1440. If you're on a 4K monitor, you're going to want to set this to 3840 by 2160. And if you're on a 1080p monitor, you're going to want to set this to 1920 by 1080. For window position X and Y, set these both to -1. For full screen mode, I would recommend running the game in full screen borderless, which is a value of 1. But if you want to run the game in exclusive full screen, set this value to 0. Running DBD in exclusive full screen can help performance on lower end computers because it tells Windows to basically put all performance into DBD and stop performance on other background processes. But if you do this, just like with any other full screen game, it'll be really annoying anytime you alt tab because it'll make your screen flicker and turn black. So I personally recommend just keeping it on windowed full screen. From my understanding, the difference between windowed full screen and full screen isn't that drastic if you're on at least a medium end PC. But if you're on a lower end PC, turn this to 0. You can also turn this to 2 if you just want windowed, but I don't see why you'd ever do that. If you do want to run it on exclusive full screen by setting it to 0, there's another setting later in the video that you'll also need to have, so make sure you stick around for that. For audio quality level, this should by default be 0. From my understanding, this is different for every game. Some have audio quality get better if you change it to like 1, 2, or 3, but some it's in the reverse. You can test it, but I think 0 for this game is probably what you should keep it at because it's the default, and I would assume the devs put it at the best possible option. Now scroll down until you see frame rate limit. You're going to want to change this to the exact same thing that you put earlier. I don't know why there's 2 separate options, but you're going to want to put it to the exact same value that you have in FPS limit mode, just with all of these extra zeros that are already there. there. Desired screen width and height, do the exact same thing as your resolution size X and Y from above earlier. And then the last setting we'll change in here is use HDR display output. If your monitor supports HDR, you can set this to true. I don't believe this does anything for DBD because I don't think DBD supports HDR content, but you could try it and test it. I tested it before and I didn't really notice a difference, but you could try it and see if it does anything. Now, before you close out of this, make sure you go to File and click Save, or you can alternatively just press Control S, then close out of this, right click on GameUserSettings.ini, go to Properties, check Read Only, and then hit Apply and OK. Read Only prevents Dead by Daylight from resetting your settings every time you launch the game, since you're saying that it's only allowed to read that file and not write on that file. However, setting this to read only can cause some confusion in the future, so listen to this very carefully. For one, if you try to change any settings in this file in the future and you try to save it, so for example, if I change foliage to 1 and I press save, it'll come up with a save as prompt. So if you're trying to change something, you have to go back into game user settings, go into properties, uncheck read only, click apply, go back into the notepad, save it to whatever you want, then recheck read only, hit apply and OK. Because if you have read only enabled, you're also not able to write to that file. And two, if you try to change any settings in DBD's actual in-game settings, they will reset every time you launch the game. So for example, I have my party privacy state set to private in my game user settings file, but if I change it to friends only when I go into DBD, it'll turn back to private every time I launch the game. So just keep this in mind. But always make sure that it's in read only once you launch the game again, because otherwise all your settings might get reset. Now that we're done with game user settings, something you can do is alter your monitor settings. Almost all monitors will have their own monitor settings that you can control brightness and contrast and color and stuff like that. If you're on console, feel free to mess with those settings, but if you're on PC, I would highly recommend not changing these, as we'll be customizing all of these within Dead by Daylight itself. Okay, the next thing we're gonna do is start working on optimizing your system. If you do not have an NVIDIA graphics card, you can skip to the next chapter of this video because this section will not apply to you. But if you do have an NVIDIA graphics card, go to your desktop, right click and open NVIDIA control panel. If you don't see this option, but you see show more options, click on that. And if you don't see show more options or the NVIDIA control panel, but you know that you have an NVIDIA graphics card, press your Windows key and type in Microsoft Store and then press enter and then search for control panel and you'll see NVIDIA control panel right here. So just install that. In your control panel, we're gonna adjust some settings to optimize your entire PC as well as possible. So first things first, we'll start from the top, adjust image settings with preview. Set this to use the advanced 3D image settings because we're gonna customize it. So after you set it to that, hit apply. Now go to manage 3D settings. There are two tabs, global settings and program settings. Global settings will affect your GPU as a whole, whereas program settings will only affect the specific application that you choose. I will be making changes to my global settings to optimize my entire PC, but if you want to only do it for DBD, go to program settings, click on add, and scroll down until you find DBD. If you can't find Dead by Daylight, then launch the game, press Control Shift Escape to open the task manager. By the way, always go into your task manager settings and change it to always on top. This is something you should do on every computer because if a game crashes and you try to open your task manager to close it and it's not set to always on top, you may not be able to focus your mouse onto the task manager. But if it's set to always on top and the game crashes, you're almost guaranteed to be able to close out of the game. So once you're in here, find Dead by Daylight and right click on it and do open file location. Then you can close out a task manager and click on this little space in the file explorer right here where it's empty to select all of this and then do Control C to copy it. You can close out of that, go back to the control panel, click on browse, then again, go to the empty space to select it all, do Control V to paste it, and then press enter and it'll take you here and just select Dead by Daylight Windows 64 shipping, or if you're on Epic Games, it should say like EGS shipping. It's whatever the exe file is. And then once you click on that, click open, and this will set it to that program. You can now close out a DBD for now. I'm gonna go back to global settings, but each of these settings should be the exact same thing depending on what you choose. Starting with image scaling, this is similar to FSR that we talked about earlier, where it automatically upscales lower resolutions to match your monitor resolution. This can give you a huge performance boost, so I'd recommend setting this to 20% and lowering the resolution by a little bit in the GameUserSettings.ini file to see if it helps your performance without changing the look of your game that much. If you're still happy with how the game looks, keep lowering your resolution until you find one that looks the same, but it'll perform much better. However, if you turn the setting on and you don't lower your resolution, it can make your performance worse. So either change this in your program settings or remember to lower the resolution by a bit in every single game that you play. For ambient occlusion, set this to performance or off if you want the best FPS possible. Now scroll down until you see background application max frame rate. I would recommend turning this on and setting it to the lowest, which is 20 FPS. This makes it so that when you're not tabbed into the game, it runs it at 20 FPS. So it's not using power if you're not even on the game to begin with. However, I did actually run into an issue with this with my clipping software. I can show you what I mean right here. So if I have it set to 20 FPS and I open my clipping software, you can see how unbelievably laggy it is. So I unfortunately had to turn this off. For CUDA GPUs, set this to every single one that you can. If you have CUDA sysmin fallback, set it to driver default, then scroll down until you see low latency mode. Turn this to on or ultra. I would recommend on. For max frame rate and monitor technology, this is specific for your needs. If you play a lot of esports games or competitive games like Overwatch or CSGO, and you get a lot higher FPS than your monitor's refresh rate, set max frame rate to off and set monitor technology to fixed refresh. However, if you play a lot of single player games or games where the highest FPS possible doesn't matter as much, set the maximum frame rate to 3 below your monitor's refresh rate. So I have a 240 Hz monitor, so I would set it to 237, and then set your monitor technology to G-Sync compatible. Then hit apply and go up to setup G-Sync on the left and make sure you enable G-Sync for whatever full screen mode that you chose. So in my case, I play on windowed borderless, so I would choose this option and click apply. Now scroll down until you see OpenGL rendering GPU. Make sure you set this to your NVIDIA GPU. For power management mode, just set this to normal or optimal, whatever it says on your PC. For me, it's normal. For preferred refresh rate, set this to highest available. For shader cache size, I would set this to 100 gigabytes. But if you go to your file explorer and you go to this PC and you look on your C drive, if you have less than 300 gigabytes free, I would recommend just changing this to like 10 gigabytes or something. But if you have a ton of storage, set this to 100 gigabytes. For this first texture filtering option, I would set this to on. For texture filtering, if you really want to squeeze FPS, you could set this to performance or high performance. I'm just going to set this to quality because that was the default and I think it's the most balanced. For vertical sync, if you turn this off in the game user settings, also turn it off here. But if you know that you use VSync on some games but not other games, you could just select use the 3D application setting. But I'm going to keep it on off. And lastly, this is not DBD related, but while you're here, if you have VR, set VR pre-rendered frames to 1 and VR variable rate supersampling to adaptive, and then hit apply. Your screen might flicker a bit and it might crash some programs, but that's completely normal. If you did this in the global settings, remember that you can go into the program settings and customize these settings on a per game basis. So if you want to change some settings only for DBD, you can do that here. Now moving on to change ECC state, you're just going to want to unselect this. This should only be selected if you do like machine learning tasks or massive 3D workloads or industry work. So just unselect it because most of you will probably just be using your PC for like gaming and regular work. Next, go to configure surround and set your processor to your GPU and hit apply. Then go to change resolution. Make sure you're on your native resolution and make sure you set your refresh rate to the highest possible option. Then scroll down and change this setting to use NVIDIA color settings and then press apply. Now go to the help tab at the top and click on system information. You should see something that says resizable bar. If it says yes or if it says unsupported, then don't worry about this step. But if it says off, go to Google and search for NVIDIA Inspector download. Click on this GitHub link and then click on this zip file to download it. Once you've downloaded it, you can click on it to open it and run the exe file. This will open up the NVIDIA profile inspector. Make sure your profile is set to this global driver profile thing and scroll down until you see the header that says 5 common. Then you're going to want to change RBAR feature to enabled, RBAR options to the 0001, and then RBAR size limit to the 0004. Then go to the top right, press apply changes and click X. And now you can close out of your NVIDIA control panel. Okay, now that we've done that, there are a couple more performance options that you can do just in Windows settings to make your game run even smoother. One thing that may make your computer and game run slowly is if your storage is pretty filled up. So here's a couple of ways to clear some space. Please note that I'm on Windows 11, so things may be named a little bit differently or be in a little bit different places, but they should be similar enough for you to be able to still follow it. If you're confused, you can look up how to do these steps on Windows 10. The first thing we're going to do is press Windows key R and type in %temp%. This will bring up all of your temporary files. You could just press Control A to select them all, press delete and press enter, and then select do this for all current items and press continue. These are all just temporary files that your computer doesn't need. There are going to be some folders that are currently being used and you can't delete. So if this comes up, select this box and then just press skip and do it again. Those are all the files that your programs that you currently are running have open, so that's why you can't delete them. This is completely safe to do. There's a Windows setting to do this as well. I just like to do it this way because I find it faster. Now press on your Windows key and search for Storage Sense and click on Turn on Storage Sense. This will take you to your settings and you're going to want to make sure that Storage Sense is turned on, and then you can click on it. Make sure this checkbox is ticked and make sure automatic user content cleanup is turned on and to run Storage Sense every month at least. This automatically clears stuff like your recycle bin and your temporary files that we just did that are no longer being used. So it's just a good way to consistently and automatically delete those files that you don't need on your computer anymore. You can also set this option to delete files in your downloads folder if they haven't been open for more than a certain amount of time. So I'm going to set this to 60 days, which is the max, just so it still deletes them, but I still have a pretty lengthy amount of time to go back to them in my downloads folder if I need to. And then you can click run storage sense now. And after a few minutes, we can move on to the next step. Okay, once it's done, you can close out of that and search for snipping tool and then open it up. If you never use snipping tool, it's fine. But this is the thing where if you press Windows key Shift S, you can take a screenshot of anything and then it goes to your clipboard and you can, paste it somewhere like that. But by default, if you go into your file explorer and you type in pictures and press enter, it's actually saving it to this file in screenshots and saving them here. So it's taking up unnecessary space if you're only wanting to use it to copy paste it temporarily and you're not trying to actually save the pictures into this folder. So make sure you delete all of these if you have anything in here and then go back into that snipping tool we just opened, press the 3 dots, click on settings and turn off automatically save screenshots. Then you can close out of that. Next, search for advanced system settings and click on view advanced system settings. Now open the performance settings right here. Most of these won't affect your performance too much, but if you're on a lower end PC, you can select adjust for best performance and then just check enable peak, show thumbnails instead of icons, show window contents while dragging, and smooth edges of screen fonts and then click apply. I think these are the most important ones in my opinion. I'm personally going to do adjust for best appearance and then just turn off show translucent selection rectangle and click apply. For me, it actually doesn't matter if I have that off. If you have your desktop icons on and you drag your mouse around, it'll make a completely translucent box. Whereas if you have it on, it'll be blue. I just like the translucent one better, but I also keep my desktop icons off for the minimalist look. So I guess it doesn't really affect me. Then when you're happy with your settings, go into the advanced tab and make sure it says adjust for best performance of programs. Make sure programs is selected and then click apply and okay. And now you can close out of that and search for power plan and click on choose a power plan. There are a lot of YouTube videos out there that tell you to use high performance mode or tell you to go into the command prompt and unlock the secret ultimate performance mode. But from my research, it's actually recommended by most people nowadays to just stay on the balanced setting. Higher performance tells the CPU to run at its maximum clock speed 24/7. So even if you're just idling on your desktop, your CPU will still be running at full power, which just uses more power and generates more heat and reduces the lifespan of your hardware at almost no performance benefit. Balanced allows your CPU to dynamically change clock speeds depending on what you're doing, and most modern CPUs are designed to do that efficiently, so just keep it on balanced. But I would recommend doing your own research and deciding which power plan to use because I'm only reiterating what I've seen from my research and I'm not directly well versed in this area. So now you can close out of that and search for game bar and go to the game bar settings. Make sure you turn off this tab and then you can close out of this and then search for game bar once again and click on this little green icon, or alternatively, you can just press Windows key G and that toggles it on or off. Once you're in here, press the settings button and pretty much turn off every single checkbox if you don't use Xbox Game Bar. Especially under the widgets tab, make sure this is disabled, which is record in the background while I'm playing a game. If you have your own clipping software, just use that instead of this. But if you don't use clipping software, this will be taking up so much of your resources because it's constantly recording and deleting things while you're playing games. So make sure this is disabled. Once everything's disabled, you can press Windows key G to just close out of that again. Next thing we're going to do is search for notifications and click on notifications and actions. Make sure you just turn off notifications. I don't know a single person that actually uses notifications on PC, but if you want to keep them on, you can disable specific ones down here, but I would just recommend turning them off entirely. Now, the next thing we're going to do is press Control Shift Escape to open the task manager and go to startup apps. Now you're going to want to click on status until the arrow is pointing down. And this basically sorts by things that are enabled on startup. So anything that's enabled will automatically launch when you turn on your PC. So I would go through this list, right click and do disable for anything that you don't think is necessary to launch. So if you see a program that's enabled that you know you don't use, so for example, Microsoft Edge, I don't use Edge because I use Chrome. So I'm just going to disable this. This prevents them from automatically launching when you turn on your PC. However, if you see something that you have no idea what it is or what it means, I would not disable that because it could be essential to your computer. So for example, I don't know what this Asus notification.exe thing is, but I assume it's important because I have Asus peripherals, so I'm not going to disable it. And once you've gone through that list, then you can close out of that and you should be in a very good state now. I do want to mention this, but your last possible resort, if you're running into a lot of issues that you didn't used to have, is to just completely factory reset your PC. If you just want to get a clean slate and remove any bloatware that you may have, you can factory reset it, but make sure you back up all your important data and whatnot before you do it. I'm not going to explain how to do it in this video because I want you to do the research on it before you go forward with it so you don't lose any important data. Okay, now we're going to move on to filter settings for DBD. I'm sure you've seen many people using brightness and saturation filters on Dead by Daylight. So here are a few ways to set this up for your PC. The best option is Reshade, which has a ton of customization and it shows up in footage or live streams that you record in DBD, but it is more resource intensive than the second best option, which is NVIDIA Filters, which is less resource intensive, but it gets reset whenever you update your drivers and it has very little customization and it also doesn't show up in footage or live live streams of DBD, unless you record with display capture, which also uses more resources. And then the third best option, like I mentioned earlier, is to just change your monitor settings or your desktop color settings in your GPU control panel. So for example, in my NVIDIA control panel, you can go to adjust video color settings or adjust video image settings and kind of mess with this stuff to change the look of it. But I would recommend keeping those at default if you can avoid it. So I'll start with Reshade. For Reshade, go to Google and type Reshade.me and hit enter. Then click decline on We Use Cookies. Click on the download button and then click on this download Reshade button here. Before you open the Reshade installer that you just downloaded, make sure you launch DBD. And once you're in DBD, press Control-Shift-Escape to open the task manager. Right click on Dead by Daylight and do open file location. Then you can close out a task manager. Now you're going to click on this empty part to select the entire file path and then do Control-C to copy it. Just minimize out of this because we'll use it later. Now launch the Reshade setup that you just downloaded. Click on Browse, then click on this empty space and paste what you just copied and press enter. And then find the exe file. For Steam, it should say Windows 64 shipping. And for Epic Games, I believe it's EGS shipping. So click on it and then press open. Then press next. DBD uses DirectX 10, 11, or 12. So select this option and then press next. If you run into an error that says you cannot proceed because the application is running, just close the game and then relaunch Reshade setup. If you want to use my Reshade preset and tinker with that, the only thing you need to do is click on Sweet Effects once to open it and then scroll down and check Lift Gamma Gain, Luma Sharpen, SMAA, Technicolor 2, and Vibrance. If you want to install absolutely everything so you have a ton of things to work with, though I think most of them are kind of pointless, you can click uncheck all and then check all again to select it all and then press next. This will install literally every single shader that Reshade offers, so you have maximum potential in terms of customization, but it will take up more storage. So if you're only using my template, only install those 5. Then once you're done, press finish and relaunch Dead by Daylight. Now you should see this little thing on the top left that says Reshade, so that means you know that you installed it correctly. If Dead by Daylight's crashing when you launch it, you're gonna have to enable DirectX 12, which is possible for both Steam users and Epic Games users. For Steam, you're just gonna wanna go to your Steam library, right click on DVD, then click Properties, and type in -DX12, and then close out of that, and then relaunch it. If you're on Epic Games, I don't have DBD installed, so I'm gonna use Fortnite as an example, but you're just gonna go to the 3 dots, then click on Manage, then turn on this little check mark that says Launch Options, and type in -D3D12, and then you can close out of that and relaunch. If you're still crashing, join my Discord server and hopefully one of us can help. If you want my preset, go to the link in the description and join my Discord server, and then go to the downloads channel and click on the link that says My Reshade Preset. This will open up a Mediafire tab and just click on this blue download button right here. Now that you have that file, go back to the file explorer that we opened earlier. If you need to reopen it, do Control-Shift-Escape to open the task manager, right click on DBD and click on Open File Location, and you're just gonna drag my Reshade preset into this. Now that it's there, you can close out of this and press Home on your keyboard to open the Reshade menu. If you do not have a home button, go back into this folder that we just had open, click on Reshade.ini, and scroll down until you see the input header. Find where it says Key Overlay 36000, and open this website right here, which I'll have linked in the description. Now you can type any key on your keyboard, and it'll show you the exact key code you need to replace this 36 digit with. So for example, if you want to open it with the equal sign, you go into here, type in 187, do Control S to save it, and now if you relaunch a game, whenever you press the equal sign, it'll open the menu. If you dragged in my Reshade preset, click on the reload button at the bottom and open this menu at the top, and make sure you select Kaido Reshade Preset.ini and click select. This will load my exact settings. My preset will look different on every single monitor, so I'm going to be going through each setting and explaining what they are so you know exactly what to change to your liking. Make sure you uncheck performance mode to be able to edit any of these options. Then click on collapse all at the top right so that we can go through each setting one by one. Lift gamma gain essentially just controls your brightness. I would recommend only using this RGB gamma thing and using the arrows so that they're equal. It is kind of slow, so if you want to do it faster, you can do it manually, but this basically just increases or decreases your brightness or darkness. I like to keep mine around 1.5 because I really like my game to be bright. Then I'll collapse that and open up Luma Sharpen. This just makes your game look a little bit sharper. I would recommend using anywhere from like 0.5 to 1.5. If you go too much, the game just looks really crunchy, and I don't personally like it, but I know some people do. And if you go too little, the game looks almost blurry. So I like to go to about 1. I think 1 is a good middle ground. Then I'll close that and open SMAA. This is anti-aliasing. I like anti-aliasing. If you don't like it, then just uncheck it at the top so you can get rid of it. I think it makes the game look better because it gets rid of jagged edges. It's really hard to notice a difference to begin with, and especially on a YouTube video, you just won't be able to see it. But again, it smooths jagged edges to make them look a little better, but some people think it makes the game look blurry. So if you don't like it, then turn it off. Now collapsing that, we're going to go into Technicolor. This is purely just how colorful your game looks. So I like to turn the saturation up a little bit to like 0.8, and then I turn the brightness all the way to max. This is just the brightness of the colors, and then I turn my strength up to 6.6. If you want the game to look less colorful, turn the saturation slider down. I like to keep it around 0.8. Now closing that and opening Vibrance. This is kind of the same thing, but saturation saturation and vibrance are a little bit different. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but this essentially controls your color as well. So I like to keep mine somewhere in this area, but just change it depending on your tastes. Once you're done with all those settings, make sure you select performance mode. If you want to enable other shaders that you may have downloaded, always remember to deselect performance mode to be able to edit everything. Now go to the settings tab at the top. Here are a couple settings that you may want to change. Overlay key is the key to open this overlay. So I have it on home. I would recommend setting something for effect toggle key if you ever want to turn off your shaders. So I set it to my end key, which is right below my home key. The reason I do this is because there's some maps like Area of Crows and Coldwind where the reshade just looks absolutely awful. So I like to just press the end button to just turn it off entirely when I play on those maps. And then for previous preset key and next preset key, if you're only using one preset, you don't need to change this to anything. But if you're using multiple and you like to switch between them quickly, I would set some keybinds. I have like skip and previous track buttons on my keyboard. So I just set it to those because it's really easy for me to remember since they're arrows. And then make sure this load only enabled effects is checked. If it's not checked and you downloaded every single shader earlier, it's going to load every single one of those shaders whenever you open the game. And if you're playing on exclusive full screen, every single time you alt tab back into the game, it's going to also load them again. So make sure this is checked. This is very important. Now go down to this button that says show force load all effects button. Make sure this is checked. This allows you to go, if you go back into home, you could press this button to load all of the other effects that you're not using if you do want to mess around with them. And if you do that, you can go back into settings, uncheck load only enable effects, and then recheck it to make them all unloaded again. Now this is kind of personal preference, but I like to set my global text to 15. 20 is the default, but I just think it's too big, so I turn it down to 15 just so it's a little more minimalist and so that more things fit on the screen. And I also turn my frame rounding all the way up to max. As you can see, when you change it, it just turns everything from more of a square shape to a circular shape. I think the circular shape looks so much better, but that's obviously personal preference. Remember to always turn on performance mode once you're done messing with your settings. Now that you're done with that, you can press your overlay key to remove this overlay, and now you're good to go. But remember, we still have things for you to change, like being able to skip this annoying news pop-up every time you launch the game and automatically skipping the intro cutscene. So if you want those quality of life changes, don't click off the video just yet. I'll also leave a link to a Discord server that has a ton of different reshade presets if you want to mess around with those. Okay, if you're not using reshade and you have an NVIDIA GPU, use GeForce Game Filters. To install this, you need to have GeForce Experience downloaded. So press the Windows key and search for GeForce Experience. If you do not see it, just Google GeForce Experience download. Click on the first link that says download GeForce Experience, then click on this green download now button and go through the whole install process. Once you're in GeForce Experience, click on this drivers tab. And if you have a driver update, make sure you click on this download button. And then once it's done downloading, click on the Express installation button. You always want to keep your drivers up to date. I'm not going to do it right now because I don't want it to crash my recording software, but make sure you check for updates to see if you have an update so you can update your drivers. Once you're done installing the latest driver, go to the settings icon, then make sure optimize playable settings is checked and go into the general tab. Now scroll down until you see in-game overlay and turn this on. Now go into the settings tab and open photo mode / game filter and make sure this is set to on. Now press back, go into keyboard shortcuts and take note of the keyboard shortcut for edit filters. I believe by default it's Alt F3. Now you could press the X on the top right, go back into DBD and then press that shortcut key. So for me, it was Alt F3 and that should open this game filter section. If you're getting an error that says a supported game is required to use this feature, go back into GeForce Experience, click on games and apps and make sure everything in the scan location section is where your game is installed. So I don't actually have my game installed on my C drive. I have it installed on a separate drive. So I had to press add, go to that drive and then go to the Steam library and press select folder. Then click scan now and it'll scan that folder to check for the exe. If you're on Epic Games or you don't know where the Steam library folder is, you can just click add and then select any of your drives and then press select folder and do scan now. It'll take longer to scan because it's scanning your entire drive, but it should be able to find it. Now, if you go back home, you should be able to see Dead by Daylight right here. Also, you just make sure you have program files and program files 86 because that's usually where your games will install. If you don't, just press add, go to your C drive and then select those folders. If it's still not working, make sure you restart DBD. And if it's still not working after that, you could try to Google Solutions or join my Discord server and hopefully me or my community can help you troubleshoot. So once you're in your game, press Alt F3 or whatever your hotkey was. Just click on one of these three numbers. These are just different presets that you can make. I'm going to click on 2 because I already have one in 1. Add color, sharpen, and brightness and contrast by clicking on this add filter button right here. So I'll start with a blank slate. I'll click add filter, brightness and contrast, add filter, color, and add filter, sharpen. Your game is going to look a little purple for now, but don't worry about that. Let's first start with brightness and contrast. So open that up. I like to turn my gamma up to make the screen brighter, turn my shadows down to make the shady parts brighter, keep my highlights at default, turn the contrast up just a tiny bit, and turn exposure up just a tiny bit. Now go to color, turn tint intensity all the way down, turn tint color all the way down, and turn vibrance up a little bit. This will add color to your game to make it look nice. Now go to sharpen, and this just controls the sharpness of your screen. So if you have it too high, it looks really crunchy and if you have it too low, it looks kind of blurry. So I like to keep it anywhere from like 20% to 30%. And it's as simple as that. Once you're done, just press this done button at the bottom and now you have your filters. But just remember that every time you go into your GeForce experience and you update your drivers, it's going to reset these filters and you're going to have to come back to this tutorial to set them up again. Plus, if you're not using display capture on like OBS or something because you're a streamer or you're recording gameplay, this will also not show up. So you have to be using display capture for it to show up. If you're using game capture, you're not going to be able to see the filters. And again, the last possible thing I would do if you can't do either Reshade or the NVIDIA filters is to just change your monitor settings. But this affects literally everything on your PC and not just your game itself, which can make other things look really weird. Okay, now for custom icons, you're going to want to close out a DBD, open Google, and go to nightlight.gg. Once you're here, go to the desktop tab on the bottom left and click on download. Once you install Nightlight and you open it, go to the settings tab and you're going to want to make sure that these installation paths are set to the correct place. For Steam users, go to Steam, right click on Dead by Daylight, go to manage, browse local files, and then click on this empty space to select it all. Do Control C to copy it, close out of that, go back into Nightlight, click on this little blue edit icon next to the Steam installation path, click on this empty space right here, do Control V to paste it, then do select folder. For Epic Games users, open Epic. I don't have DBD installed on Epic, so I'm going to use Fortnite for an example. Click on the three dots, go to manage, and click on this little folder icon right here. Now do the same thing, click on this empty space to select it all, do Control C to copy it, go back into Nightlight, click on the blue edit icon to the right of the Epic Games installation path, select the empty space, paste it, and then do select folder. And that should put it in this box here. Now, once you're done with that, go to packs, and here are all of the custom packs that you can use. You can sort by a ton of filters like the title or the game version, and you can even search by portraits only or perks only. I'm using the perks by daylight pack, so I'm going to search it here and press enter. If you don't see this come up, make sure you press reset on the filters because you might have accidentally selected a filter. You can click on the pack to see kind of what everything will look like. I think it looks really good because it's clean and it's simple. So I'm going to press the install button, and here you can select everything that you want to install or not install. I'm going to be installing a different portrait pack, but as you can see, there's no portraits option in this pack, which means that there's no portraits. So I'm just going to install all of it by clicking this blue button here. Now that it's done installing, I'm going to press X, and then I'm going to install my custom portraits. I use a one called Shitty UI Revived because I think they're absolutely hilarious. Like, they just look so dumb and so goofy. I love it. Unfortunately, as you can see here, it's only for End Transmission chapter, which is the chapter with Singularity. So there are going to be a couple of characters without portraits, but I'm going to click install, then click on this button next to files to unselect all of it, and then only select portraits. You can also click on this arrow next to the folders and keep clicking to get literally all of the options for each of the characters. So if you really want to customize your custom portraits, you can do it that way as well. So now that I have portraits selected, I'm going to install it, and that's it for custom icons. Now you can launch DBD and all of your custom icons will be there. If you ever want to go back to the defaults for whatever reason, open Nightlight and go to this default icons tab on the top left, and then click on this restore default icons button. All right, now for our quality of life settings, the first thing we're going to want to do is do Windows key R, then do % local app data %, then go to Dead by Daylight, saved, config, and then if you're on Epic Games, open EGS. If you're on Steam, open Windows Client. For the next update with the FOV slider, if you have game user settings set to read only, even if you update the game, it's not going to add this field of view section. So what you're going to want to do is rename this to something like old underscore, and then when you relaunch the game, it'll create a new GameUserSettings.ini file, and you can open that new one and open this old one, and you can have them side by side, and then just copy all of your settings from one to the other. And then that new one will have the field of view option. And then just remember, once you're done, right click, go to properties, and make sure read only is checked before you launch your game. Now, if you want to get rid of that annoying news pop-up every time you launch the game, you'll want to right click on game user settings, go to properties, and uncheck read only, and click apply. Then open game user settings, do Control F, and type in news, and then press enter, and it should bring you to this highest weight seen news. Turn this to 99999, and then do Control S to save, close out of that, turn on read only again, press apply, and then press OK. Now this should make it so that you never see that news pop up again. The next quality of life change I like to do is in the engine.ini file. If you join my Discord server with the link below and then go in the downloads channel, I'm going to upload a link to this notepad, which has 3 different things that you can add to your engine.ini file at the bottom. The first one, which is this, decreases your HUD further than 70%. I would not recommend going below 0.8 or going above 1.0. If you want the minimal look, I would do 0.8. So you're just going to want to copy this, scroll to the bottom of your engine.ini file, press enter twice so that there's a space, and then paste it right there. Next thing I would do is disable your mouse acceleration. So copy this, do the same thing, paste it there. If you don't know what mouse acceleration is, it essentially makes it so that if you move your mouse faster, your sensitivity increases higher. But if you barely move your mouse, your sensitivity will be lower. It doesn't matter as much in Dead by Daylight as it does in like first-person shooters, for example, but mouse acceleration is like one of the worst things for gaming. so I would just turn it off. And lastly, if you do not like anti-aliasing, like we've talked about earlier, you could put this into the bottom as well to disable it completely. But I personally like anti-aliasing, so I'm going to remove that. So once you have all of the settings that you want out of these 3 options, make sure you press enter twice so that you have 2 spaces below your settings that you just added. These 2 spaces just make it so that you don't have to check read only on the engine.ini file, because whenever you launch the game, it adds 2 lines of code, and then when you close the game, it deletes it. So these 2 spaces will give it enough room to do that without overwriting the stuff that you just put in them. Now you can close out of that, and if you want to automatically skip the intro cutscene every time you launch the game, go to where you have DBD installed. So again, if you're a Steam user, right click on Dead by Daylight, manage, browse local files. If you're on Epic Games, click the 3 dots, click on manage, then click on this little folder icon. Then go into Dead by Daylight, content, movies, additional loading screen, and find the thing that says loading screen post login.bk2, and then just rename it to something. I renamed it to old underscore just because that's the easiest for me. And now this will automatically skip the intro scene every time you launch your game, but you'll have to do this quite often because every single time that DBD updates the game and they add a new intro cutscene, it'll replace this file. And finally, the last thing you're going to want to do is to add some launch options. For Steam users, right click on DBD, then click on properties. I would highly recommend adding this launch option right here, DX12, to launch the game in DirectX 12. If you have pretty old hardware, don't add this in, but anyone with a relatively modern PC, make sure you add this because it'll make your game run much smoother. Another thing you can add is use all available cores. Steam uses 3 of your CPU cores by default, but some CPUs have a ton more cores, like mine is 24, for example. So this can allow DBD to use all of them. The next thing you can add is -high. It tells your CPU to prioritize DBD over other processes. If you stream or record, you may not want to use this because it could potentially interfere with the recording or streaming software to give it worse performance, but I have not tested that yet, but just keep it in mind. And here are some other launch options that you can use for specific situations. Supposedly for Unreal games, you can do -novid to remove the intro cutscene, but I don't believe that works for DBD, which is why we did the other method, but it doesn't hurt to have that in there, I guess. You can also do stuff like -full screen to launch the game in exclusive full screen, or -windowed to launch the game in windowed mode. You could do no texture streaming, which disables the loading of all textures of a reduced quality, so you'll only load textures of the original high quality. I don't know much about that, so I would do more research on it, but I'm personally not going to use it. If you have 8 gigabytes of RAM or less, you could do -low memory, and this should help your performance. If you're on a really bad computer, you could do -SM4, which replaces the shaders from DirectX 11 to DirectX 10. So obviously you don't want to use this because you're downgrading from 11 to 10 instead of upgrading from 11 to 12. Some effects will be disabled and become visually worse if you do this. You can also do D3D10, which is kind of the same thing as SM4, but a little rougher. And the last thing you can do is malloc equals system, and this forces Windows optimization to the application. I don't have a lot of experience with that, so I just wouldn't recommend using it for now unless you do more research on it. Once you have all these launch options, make sure you run DBD to see if it crashes. If it doesn't crash, then you're good to go. If it does crash, then remove each launch option one by one to figure out which one is causing you to crash, and just don't use that launch option. For Epic Games users, you press the 3 dots on Dead by Daylight, then go to Manage, turn on launch options here. Again, you should always use DirectX 12, and this is the launch option for that, -D3D12. And the only other one that I personally know of for Epic Games is use all available cores, just like the one for Steam. This will allow maximum usage of your CPU for the game to hopefully make it run better. I've never used this on Epic Games, so I don't know if this actually does anything, but from my research, it does do something. But again, I don't use DBD on Epic Games, so I don't know much about the launch options, so I'd recommend you do your own research. Your game should now look absolutely incredible and run extremely smoothly. It'll just make DBD feel much better to play. If this video was helpful, be sure to drop a like and share it with your friends that may play this game. YouTube thinks that you'll enjoy this video, so check it out and see if they're right.